Autofocus, anamorphic, and full frame all in the same sentence? Is that even possible? Well, now it is. Alright, we're back in Toronto. We're doing some testing today with this new lens. This is the Sirui Astra 50mm T1.8 1.33 times autofocus anamorphic lens for full frame. That was a mouthful. This is basically an autofocus anamorphic lens that works on full frame, which is the first one ever made. We got my cousin down here shooting with the Fuji. We're just gonna walk around, get a couple clips, see how everything looks with this lens. So far, I'm really liking it. Real quick disclosure, this video is not sponsored by Sirui, but it is sponsored by K&F Concept. More on this later. Alright, so let's get into some of the nitty-gritty details about this lens. So this is a 1.33 times anamorphic squeeze, and I actually think that 1.33 times is about the perfect ratio of a D-squeeze if you're going to be using it on 16:9 sensors, which most of us are. It gives you just enough squeeze to give that cinematic look, but you're not losing too much of the image. And if you're looking for like your first anamorphic lens, this is a good way to get into anamorphics without making it seem too drastic from your normal footage. Now looking back at all the footage that I shot, it actually looks pretty good. Now this would depend on your style and your taste. So for me, on these Sirui Astras, I've also used Sirui's other anamorphic lenses that were for APS-C cameras. I've done a ton of videos about those. But for Sirui lenses, I've always found that they don't give that much character, which depending on your taste, it may be a good thing or a bad thing. For my personal taste, I like a little bit more character in my footage, and that's why I also own Blazer Remus lenses. Those have a lot more character to them compared to the Sirui Astras, so that'll be my preference, and this is not that much of the style that I'm looking for. But if you do like that more neutral look, these will give it to you, and the good thing about that is that then you can also mix in this anamorphic footage with a ton of your other footage. It doesn't matter too much what kind of shooting you're doing. A more neutral anamorphic look means that you can use it for a lot more scenarios without making it seem too jarring. So that is totally like a preference thing, whether you like a little bit more character or you would prefer to have your images more neutral. And this is just like any cine lens as well. Some cine lenses have way more character than other cine lenses, so it's just personal preference, and you can just look at all of the footage that I'm showing you and decide for yourself whether you want a little bit more character or if this is enough for you. On the bright side, since it doesn't have as much character, it is a T1.8 lens, so it's going to give you that very shallow depth of field, which is going to be great for isolating a subject. T1.8 is also going to be great in low light, so if you need to do any indoor low light shooting, this is going to be great, so that makes the lens very versatile. You can also still shoot T1.8 outdoors, but for that you are going to need an ND filter because T1.8 means that your image is going to be very bright, and that's actually where the sponsor of today's video comes in, which is K&F Concept. So as you can see from a ton of my footage, I've been doing a lot of indoor and outdoor shooting, and this is very handy. So K&F Concept actually came out with these magnetic filters, and these are very useful. So to start off, these magnetic rings are 82mm, the lens like I mentioned is 67mm, so I do have a step-up ring on it. First thing you do is just screw on the magnetic ring, And after that, you're pretty much all set to go, and you can add on whatever you want. So if you want a circular polarizer, all you have to do is magnetically attach that on, and you can rotate it to adjust your CPL. You have a little knob here so you can turn it, and that will actually tighten it so that it doesn't turn if you want to lock in your CPL. If you need an ND filter when you're shooting T1.8 outdoors, you can add on this second part, and this gives you 1 to 5 stops of ND. So you can turn this and adjust your ND. If you need to still turn your CPL, you can loosen this knob, turn the whole ring, and that will adjust your CPL, and then tighten it when you have chosen the correct CPL that you want. The kit also comes with a mist filter. This is a quarter mist filter which just blooms out your highlights, and as you can see, very easy attachment. It just magnetically attaches on, and then it also comes with a front cap, and you can see how fast that is. So this is great when you're shooting outdoors, you need ND, but let's say you step inside and you don't need your ND anymore. You can just take off the ND filter and suddenly you can get all of your brightness back again. And if you step outside again, very easy, just slap this on, tighten it, and you're ready to shoot outdoors. It's just a very fast magnetic filter system, and this whole kit comes with everything that you need: CPL, VND, and a mist filter, and everything fits inside of this nice case, and you can separate it into different parts. And it also has a zipper and a magnetic latch right here. Quality of the glass is also really good, so all this footage here, I haven't seen any sort of weird tints, so I highly recommend it. So yeah, if you want to check it out, just head down to the first link in the description below, and I'll have it linked for you. Back to the video. Alright, quickly looking at the lens itself. The build quality on this lens is going to be very good. It is a full metal build, so it is going to be durable, and I'm very glad that it's not plastic. Now, as you can see, I have the 50mm T1.8 version. Obviously, they do have the other versions, the 75 and the 100. All the lenses pretty much have the same build quality and the same size, so if you want to put on a gimbal, you don't have to worry about rebalancing it. Starting at the front, it is a 67mm filter thread, so pretty common size. I usually just adapt it to 82mm. You'll notice there's a few buttons here. As you can also see, it is a 1.33 times anamorphic full frame. It is also somewhat of a fingerprint magnet, but that's okay. As you can see, there's an iris lock, so right now you have an aperture ring. Very happy that they put an aperture ring here, and if you turn it, you can hear that it's super smooth. You have a click and declick option, so if you want to make the aperture clicky, you can do that. But the iris lock is if you want to leave it in auto and control it with your camera, you can set it on A, lock the iris in, and then now this will not move. You also have an FN, so custom button that you can program in the camera, and then autofocus, manual focus toggle. Now, one thing you don't normally see with autofocus lenses is this. So this is your focus distance chart. So it just tells you how far away you're focusing. And this is not normally something you see on an autofocus lens. What's really cool is that they also have gearing. So if you do want to hook this up to a focus motor and pull focus manually, you can do that without having to attach your own gearings because they have it built in. And then if you're going to do that, that's where this comes in handy because you have the focus distance markings so that you can pull focus with this. If you open the cap, you still have a USB-C here, and this is used to update the firmware of the lens. Overall, it is a little bit bigger than I thought it would be, although it is a full frame lens, so obviously you're going to need more glass because it has to cover a bigger sensor. So while on one hand I thought it would be a little bit smaller, on the other hand, it does make sense that it is this size. Now normally with anamorphic lenses, I need to set up my camera in a camera rig with a monitor, and this not only allows me to see my image in a bigger screen, but it also lets me look at the footage de-squeezed, because this is normally how the Sirui Astras look straight out of camera, and you actually have to de-squeeze it to the proper 1.33 times de-squeeze ratio to get the proper look. And using a monitor in a rig lets me be able to accurately pull focus by myself. But the great thing is because these Sirui Astras are autofocus, right now all I'm doing is just attaching it to my camera and just running it like that, very bare bones. Because they are autofocus, I just let the camera do all the focusing and I don't really need to worry about it. And because it's only at 1.33 times de-squeeze ratio, the footage doesn't look too wonky and I'm still able to properly compose my images. And then later I just know that when I de-squeeze it, it'll look proper and it'll look good. Now if you are used to some of these Sony cameras, they actually do have a de-squeeze function in the camera, but this de-squeeze ratio has a big downside. I can put the lens on and de-squeeze it to 1.33 times, but it does not enable autofocus. I don't actually know why that is. Maybe the D-squeeze somehow messes with the sensor and it won't accurately be able to focus, but for whatever reason when you use the D-squeeze ratio, it limits your autofocus, which means you can't use that. But I think for my personal use, if I'm going to be using this lens, I actually prefer just running it bare bones, one camera, just throwing on the lens, just using the autofocus and relying on it, and then just letting the camera do its thing. Speaking of autofocus is decent. I would say that sometimes it does take a little bit longer to hunt and do the initial focus of what I'm trying to focus on, my subject. But once it locks on, usually it stays pretty tracked on, and after that, usually it's pretty good. I do find that with most lenses, in good lighting with good contrast, it does pretty well. But once you get to some lower light situations, or if there's not as much contrast, it does take a little bit longer to focus. The quality of the images that you're going to get out of this lens is actually pretty good, as you can tell from the footage. For my personal taste, I actually think that some of the footage might be a little bit too sharp, but I think for me, I personally do like a softer image, so I'm actually softening up the image just a little bit. But I think for a lot of people, if you are used to like Sony G Master lenses or just more photography lenses, I think you're going to be pretty happy with the sharpness coming out of this. One thing I was actually really surprised about is the close focus. So normally, close focusing with a 50mm is not that great, and especially for anamorphic lenses tend to be very bad at close focusing. And a lot of the times, if I want to do any sort of close-up shots, I do have to put a diopter on it. Now, this is definitely not a macro lens, but I am still able to get pretty close to what I need. The close focusing on this is rated to about 50 centimeters. So again, for a 50mm lens and an anamorphic lens of that, it's actually pretty decent. Now the flaring on this lens is also pretty subtle. I do have the silver flare version, so a lot of the flare colors will just be determined by your white balance. And I think it kind of follows the look that I mentioned, where the look of the lens is a little bit more neutral, so the flaring is also a little bit more neutral and not as pronounced. If you are looking for an anamorphic lens with a ton of flaring, these will probably not be it for you. But if you're just looking for some subtle flares, which definitely are still there if you're getting a lot of direct light into the lens, these may have the flare characteristics that you're looking for. One special use case is because the Astras are autofocus, you can actually very easily use them for anamorphic photos as well if you're trying to go for that X-pan look. You just treat it the same way as a video, you let the camera do all the focusing, and then you can just easily capture your photos and then just de-squeeze them later in post. Overall, I do think that this is a pretty solid lens. Like I mentioned, they do have a 70mm and a 100mm. I don't personally have those, but I have shot with Jaden who has both of them, and they're pretty much about the same, just different focal lengths, but like the close focusing and the sharpness and the focusing speed is pretty much very similar. And my recommendation is, if you're someone who's looking to get into their first anamorphic lens to spice up some of their B-roll or maybe tell a story with some documentary work, and you're not as comfortable pulling focus by yourself, or you don't have a first AC to pull focus for you, I think the Sirui Astras are a pretty solid choice to be able to just put it on your camera, and it's a very easy introduction into the anamorphic world. But I do think that if you are someone who's very comfortable pulling focus and you are looking for a little bit more character, I would recommend checking out something like the Blazer Mantis lenses. Those still have a 1.33x squeeze ratio, but the way they've designed it is that they actually pack in a 2x squeeze ratio into the 1.33x lens. So it's going to give it a lot more character. And if you're looking at the price of them individually and even the price of the full set, the Blazer Mantis is not actually that much more expensive than the Sirui Astras. Obviously, those are a fully manual focus set, so you will have to either pull focus by yourself, get a first AC, or use some sort of LiDAR system to be able to focus it, while the Sirui Astras are a very easy way to just put it on your camera and it'll work just like any other photography lens that you own. So this is going to be very easy. Obviously, like I mentioned, they do have gearing, so if you do want to pull focus by yourself, you can still do that with the Sirui Astras. You also have things like custom buttons, so you can also program that. So there are a few things where the Sirui Astras will have a lot more functionality. Overall, I'm very curious to know what you think about all the footage and what you think about the Sirui Astras. Obviously, Sirui has been doing lenses for a while and anamorphic lenses as well. So I'm very curious to see if you think that the Sirui Astras is something that's worth getting, or if you think that there are better choices out there. Let me know down in the comments below. If you have any questions or any additional testing that you want me to do for you, let me know down in the comments below as well, and I'll get that out for you. And really quickly before I sign off, if you're new here and you're into cameras, tech, and just good vibes all around, fun and you like this video, consider subscribing for more future videos. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.